He's been a guest on the show before. Dr. Roger Leir, welcome back to the Kevin Smith Show.
Oh, thank you, Kevin, and thank you for all the very kind words. That was very nice of you.
You can send my check next week. That'll be okay.
I'll certainly will. You fill in the zeros, of course.
Oh my! But it's true, it was really a pleasure to meet you out in California, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. And tonight, the last time you were here, we talked about the alien implants, and we will tonight as well. But there is something else that I want us to talk about a little bit first, and it has to do with UFOs. Because when we talk about these alien implants, or we talk about the possibility that some of these may be of extraterrestrial origin, and some of them, certainly the analysis of them seems to point that direction. If that's the case, then that tells us that there are extraterrestrials. Someone had to make these things. And that gives us the connection with UFOs, and you have, as I understand it, now if I'm wrong, correct me, but as I understand it, when you were in Turkey, you witnessed a number of UFOs. Am I correct?
You are absolutely 100% correct. And to extend that statement just a little bit, I think I also said that when I left Turkey, I was so tired of seeing UFOs, I wouldn't even want to bother to look up ever again.
Well, now that's a big statement. That's a lot of UFOs. On the internet, there is a video from 2008. Now, this video, some people say it's hoaxed, some people say it's the real deal. I don't know whether you know or not, whether it's the real deal or not, but it certainly is one of the best videos we've ever seen close up of what purports to be a UFO. Do you know anything about that one? It's supposed to be from Istanbul, Turkey.
If this is the video, which is called a Kamburgis video, which is a close-up of a craft, in fact, so close that you can see the occupants, it is 100% real, and I was there as that was filmed.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear. I wanted to know.
Up on my website. Unfortunately, the one that's the depiction that's up there is not as clear as the other footage I have, and we're going to switch it soon. The one I have is the clearest footage of it. Also, I think the audience would like to know that footage was taken by the Cirrus UFO organization to a university in Istanbul, and their optical physicists went over that with a fine-tooth comb, and it was on all the major television broadcasts in Turkey that that was the real McCoy. There was no faking. There was no trickery of the camera. There was not an aberration. It was not a frisbee. It talked about the reflected light off of the craft, which was coming from the full moon, and that the areas where you see the occupants are some kind of a backlighting.
Okay, now you said you were there when this was filmed. How close did this thing get to you and whoever else was there observing it?
Not as close as you might see from the footage. We were on the beach and filming out over the water. And what we saw is something bright that was under the moon. So let's say the moon was the size of a dime. This would have been the size of a flashlight. And we were more interested at that point in the moon than the little bright light that was under it. But the camera that we were using had a 400 millimeter lens on it and an electronic doubler. So as we pushed on the craft, which means focused or on the craft, it got more clear and more clear and more clear. And when we centered on it, those are the shots that became famous.
Were you astounded when you saw the video?
Oh yeah, you can hear us the exclamations being made. It's up on YouTube. It's been up for some time, but you can hear the exclamations made both in Turkish and in English for those of us that were standing there, because we were looking at it on the monitor for the camera.
How many people were there?
Oh, at that point we must have had between 6 and 8 people.
All right, now let me ask your opinion of this craft. Once it has been established that it is a real craft and it's not some type of hoax, and of course you've described for us how the photo analysis has been done and it has been established to be the real thing. But once that's done, the next question is it extraterrestrial? Or is it some sort of exotic craft that's terrestrial and secret, and we just don't know about it? So what's your opinion of that?
Well, they got a saying in Latin when it comes to legal terminology, and that's res ipsa loquitur. The fact speaks for itself. So let's look at what we're looking at. We're looking at a craft of an unusual size and shape. Nothing that the public knows, at least, that we have. We're looking at a craft that's being operated by individuals who are obviously not human. So just looking at those factors, you would have to say it's an extraterrestrial craft. However, being the rotten guy I am, we cannot rule out the fact that that craft was not made here and being flown by non-terrestrials.
Okay, so and that makes sense. So if it's made here but being flown by non-terrestrials, that kind of falls into the same category as what we hear from Charles Hall. Charles Hall talks about the tall whites and their craft, and he describes being on those craft and that the interior of the craft was manufactured here on Earth.
Yes, that's what I understand. You know, the other fact is, again, res ipsa loquitur. We know that tremendous amounts of money have been spent in back engineering vis-a-vis the black budget, certainly since 1947 and perhaps even before that. But that's 60 some odd years ago, and if an extraterrestrial craft did crash or crash land in Roswell, or 3 of them, as they say, we've had plenty of time to and plenty of money, by the way, to put in and re-engineer that craft. So it's very possible. There's another story floating around that those craft are flying around the solar system, and that they have the senior officers on the craft are non-terrestrials working with some black branch of the military who wear black uniforms. Nobody knows what branch they're attached to. So there are a number of different rumors and stories floating around.
I understand the black uniform is what we call BDUs, battle dress uniform. Fatigues, some people call it, but it's all black. That's what has been described to me.
Yeah, it's black, but you know who does that belong to?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah, which branch of the service does that actually represent? Is it okay if I read you something that I just got?
Sure.
This was written by a fellow by the name of Stoyan Sarg, Stoyansarg, and he was, let's say, how to put this, let's say, sourced from LANL and Area 51. And he writes, in response to the increased number of UFO observations, we must say that the UFOs are real. The physics of their propulsion system has been investigated theoretically and experimentally. They use a propulsion method entirely different than jet propulsion systems. The method is based on modifying the gravitational field in the surrounding region. While the craft is falling in artificially created gravity sink, the occupant inside may not feel the inertial acceleration. The gravitational sink is created by a properly activated plasma that surrounds the craft that also has a unique design quite different than rockets. The propulsion method that could be used is called field propulsion, overperforms significantly jet propulsion. It also has side physical effects that are observable disturbances of the electromagnetic waves of propagation, including light, fracturing of the Earth's magnetic field, optical glow, EMI noise, specific sound. The physics of the propulsion method is investigated and discussed in the book Field Propulsion by Control of Gravity Theory and Experiments by, again, Stoyan Sarg. So everything this guy writes, if you think about your own observations of seeing these craft, this is exactly what you're seeing.
Well, I'll tell you what, this video that we've been discussing, this video is really the most phenomenal UFO footage I've ever seen. And I've wanted for some time to find someone who could verify whether this was real or not, and over time I heard that you were there, so I had to ask you about it. And it's you know, when we talk about UFOs, usually we end up saying, well, I don't know. You know, we end up with questions about, is it real, or is that evidence real, or has that been faked, and we have questions about it. But here, you know, we've got someone who says, hey, I was there, I saw it.
Yeah, you can say that. I mean, I was there, I did see it, you know, and seeing is believing maybe, but to convince somebody else, it's, you know, if it looks too good, it can't be real. I mean, that's what people are essentially saying. But
that's kind of interesting, isn't it? Because the debunkers say about most UFO video and pictures, they say, well, they're fuzzy, they're not in focus, and with all these great cameras that are out there, why don't we ever get any good footage? And, you know, if it's real, we ought to be able to get some good footage. And then when really good footage comes along, what do they say? It's too clear, it's got to be a fake.
Right, exactly. Now, we just had an event here in California. I'm trying to nail down the date, somewhere between the 23rd and 27th of this month.
Yeah, it was on the 24th.
Excuse me?
Yeah, it was on August 24th.
Yeah, some people say the 24th, reported on the 27th. Others now are saying it was the 22nd or 23rd. That's what I'm just going through. But that was the crash in Fresno of a triangle. And I put that up on the Aliens and Scalpel website, too. And it's you know, a nice formation of triangular lights at night, and then you have the descriptions of the witnesses, and including one of the members of MUFON who was called to come to that area in the middle of the night. So a very, very interesting case, and of course, strangely enough, it happened to be on a secret Air Force base property where there was a mountain.
All right, now, do you happen to know that guy from MUFON?
Oh, do I know of him?
No, do you know him?
No, I don't know him.
Okay. He's going to be on with me later this week, and we're going to get a chance to hear his story and to talk with him and ask him questions directly. So that should be very interesting.
Oh, absolutely. I will have to tune in and listen to that.
All right, now I want to go back to Turkey for a moment. This was in 2000.
Kevin, if there's turkeys in Turkey?
I don't know. Are there?
I was asked that the other day.
I don't know. I have a friend there who lives there and is from there, but I don't know if they have turkeys there. But let me ask you now.
I don't know about the turkeys, but I did find out from my friends there that there's no Thanksgiving, so
okay,
they don't eat turkeys on Thanksgiving. Anyway, let's get back to business. I'm sorry.
That's all right. It's 2008. You're standing on the beach. You're watching a monitor. On this monitor, you can see the thing. You can see it with your naked eye, but now on the monitor, you can see what the camera is seeing. And by this time, by 2008, you've already been doing the alien implant ectomies, taking implants out of people. You've been doing that for a number of years. You've already done a number of these operations. When we come back from this break, I want to get an answer to this. What impact did seeing that have on you in relationship to those implants? Welcome back to the Kevin Smith Show. We're talking this evening with Dr. Roger Leir, and as we stepped away for break, Dr. Leir, I had asked a question. There you are in 2008. You're in Turkey. You're on the beach. You're looking at something in the sky that's anomalous. Then you look on the monitor, on the screen, so you can see what the camera is seeing, and you see a very clear image of what I think any of us would call a UFO. And you have by this time done a number of these operations where implants are taken out of people, some of whom, perhaps many of whom, think it may be of extraterrestrial origin. What kind of impact did that have on you?
Well, in looking at the craft, and remember, we're viewing the occupants through some magnification. The immediate thought that came into my mind was, are these the guys? Are these the fellows that are putting them in, or is it something else?
Oh, what did you come to any kind of a conclusion about that?
Well, since the population of the Earth world over, talks about the Greys, whether it's in Russia or Norway or South America or Israel, and we're obviously looking at Greys standing in that craft. So many people who do have memories, conscious memories, having not undergone hypnotic regression, remember Greys on the craft and the occupants that put in these objects, and so it's a pretty good bet that at least some of the Grey community are the ones that are putting them in.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say all Greys because that's like saying, it's the Orientals. Well, my God, there's Orientals from all parts of the world. And they may have all slanted eyes, but the ones from Thailand are not the same as the ones from China or Japan. So that's trying to use a broom for too broad a sweep.
Yeah.
Say all Greys.
All right, now after this event, you've seen it with your own eyes. You are absolutely convinced. There's no question in your mind, and you return to the world of mushrooms and the uninformed. And from time to time, you no doubt have had some comment that, well, I just don't believe in this, which always irks me because to me, honest to God, do we believe in doorknobs? No. We know they exist. There's nothing about UFOs to believe. Either they exist or they don't, and if they do, they just do, like doorknobs. But anyway, mushrooms tend to do that. And so you've no doubt run into people who have expressed, well, I don't buy it, I don't believe it. How does that impact you now that you have seen it with your own eyes and were there when the clearest video of any UFO ever filmed was filmed? How does that impact you now?
Well, after performing 16 surgeries and removing objects that are scientifically, and I mean by academic scientists, not like the plumber like I am who just takes it out, but telling me that these, the isotopes are non-terrestrial, they don't come from the solar system. Now we have a nuclear physicist who is on our science advisory board that says he's made calculations and they don't come from this galaxy. So you hear that, and then you have somebody negatively saying something about, oh, they don't exist, or they're devils, or whatever. It just, to me, and at my age, it just adds to my depression and confusion, and raises the ultimate question of why should I bother going on and doing surgery 17, 18, 19, and 20 when I get this knowledge out and nobody seems to give a hoot?
Well, now that brings up something else that I think we ought to talk about. There are changes, big changes going on all over the world. So many big changes, and so many changes, and so big are the changes, and so frequent, that it really pretty much has people off balance, kind of emotionally and sociologically. But in that, there are changes taking place in every strata of society, including among the so-called UFO community. There are a number of people who have been staunchly against the idea that UFOs exist, who are beginning to sort of wake up to it. So even though the population at large will probably always be dumb on this issue, by choice, I think the number of people that are in your corner, so to speak, I think that number's growing. What do you think?
Well, I belong to a number of the typical social websites like Facebook, and I read the comments about the people who are using it, and by and large, they're all very encouraging and upbeat. And I think you're right. I think there is a change that's going on. I think people are waking up. The latest statistic I know about the poll they did on Roswell, it was over, I think, 78% of the population that was polled to think that Roswell was a true non-terrestrial event. So that's up quite a few points.
It's a little bit of an amazing thing, though. I do understand. I've heard about that poll, and I understand that to be a fact. But what I don't understand is the news media in this country, the major media, still treats the subject as though it were anathema, and that's amazing to me, because their ratings, the news media ratings, are in the toilet. And yet they continue to spit in the face of 78% of the population.
Well, good heavens, my gosh, you can't find out what's going on in Iraq, Afghanistan, or the bottom of the water in the Gulf, more or less, to find out about UFOs in this country.
Well, you're right. You make a good point. And during the break, you told me something that you say about the mind being like a parachute. Why don't you share that with the audience?
Yes, I think the mind is like a parachute, and if it isn't open, you're going to buy the farm, as they say in aviation.
Very good example. Excellent example. Well, let's turn our attention to these implants. You've done 16 excises of implants. Were all of these, did they all turn out to be really anomalous, or did any of these turn out to be one of those, oh, well, okay, this one we can explain?
One of those was in that oh wow category, but it was and it was expensive to get to that oh wow category because we thought it was some kind of crystalline material. It was already working its way out when I came onto the picture. I took it out the rest of the way. We sent it in for analysis. Some thought it was crystal, some thought it was something else. We had more analysis done and more analysis. Turned out to be a very expensive piece of short-run bottle glass made by Dow Corning that had sulfur in it. So, cost a few bucks to find, a rare piece of glass, let's put it that way. But that's not to say that the individual who it was in was not an abductee.
All right, now all the rest of them turned out to be anomalous, right?
In some form or another, all the rest of them had, let's say, scientific interest.
Of the ones that had scientific interest, which one would you say is of the highest interest?
I would say the last two cases that we did have the highest interest, only from the standpoint that experience has shown us what to look for, how to look for it, and the advancement of scientific equipment has allowed us to get to where we are today. If we had, untold amount of resources, we could go back and look at the others in the same way that we're looking at these, and probably, I would guess, find the same things. But the methodology wasn't there, the technology wasn't there, and the money wasn't there, even if the technology was. So we weren't able to do the things to some of the others. In the last two cases, this was not the case. And, of course, let me give you an example. 7-8 years ago, when you talked about carbon nanotubes, it was highly theoretical, and the scientists and physicists were arguing whether they could exist or not. Some said we could possibly make them, but they don't exist in nature. Other scientists said they couldn't be made at all. It was a physical atomic impossibility. Now, today, you not only accept the fact that we can make carbon nanotubes, and we know that they don't exist in nature, but they're talking about, making things out of them, such as a launch tower that would extend up a couple of miles above the Earth, and you could launch a space vehicle and then save all the money that we would need down here for defeating the force of gravity. Other Japanese companies are going to use them to make clothing, weave them into fibers, and so a lady will be able to change the color or design of her dress at the simple input of a switch or a button or a code. They will keep you warm in the winter, and the clothes will keep you cool in the summer. Be virtually indestructible. Others were talking about the application, like you mentioned before, in science, where the nanotechnological engines can be made, put into the body, and you could have rotor rooters that would take out all the plaque and fatty material that was collecting in your arteries and get rid of it for you.
All right, we have to step away for break. When we come back, I want to pick up right there with these carbon nanotubes and their connection to these last two implants, because it sounds like I could be wrong, but it sounds like you're about to tell us that these last two implants were constructed of these things. Like you were talking about these carbon nanotubes, and I made a prediction, but we'll see if that prediction holds water. So I had to stop you in mid-sentence as you were talking about the carbon nanotubes, so I'll just say the floor is yours.
Okay, yes, these objects all contain carbon nanotubes, and then when they're put together, they form carbon nanofibers, which are then woven into carbon nanostrands. And the last specimen that we removed, we had great surprise because at some stage or another, we have to cut through this specimen to send it in for a test called ICP-MS. This tells us what the isotopic ratios are, and from that we can determine some of the possible terrestrial or non-terrestrial isotopic ratios. But anyway, it came as a great surprise because all the other 15 specimens, we had no trouble cutting through it. This one, we couldn't cut through it at all. So wound up taking it to a machine shop who used a very sharp file made of the hardest possible material, and they tried to groove it to see if they could leave a mark. It would not groove, it would not mark. And they were flabbergasted. And of course, a machine shop works with metals. So, long story short, we wound up taking it to a laser laboratory and gave them the object with a minimal amount of information regarding its origin. They took a look at it under the microscope, devised a way to hold it, and said that they could probably cut it with a laser. Then during the conversation, I think they got the idea that this was something that was either a government secret or something that they had a little trepidation about. So they did cut it, and the technician that cut it told me, yeah, he said, I put the laser on automatic and backed away across the room. So it did cut with a laser, and in this we did find a large amount of carbon nanostructures, which undoubtedly in combination with iron and meteoric iron gave it its tremendous strength.
All right, now what about the isotopic ratios on that?
That we're waiting for now because the specimen has just been sent to that particular lab, at least the half that we sent them, and so we're waiting for that to come back with the results and tell us what the isotopes are.
And I think we should say for the audience, because there will be some folks who maybe are not familiar with that term, isotopic ratios, the isotopic ratio is like a fingerprint. They can, with the isotopic ratio, scientists are able to nail down, did this come from Earth? Is it from Mars? Is it from Venus? Is it from somewhere else? And with the isotopic ratio, you can pretty well say whether it's terrestrial or non-terrestrial. Have you had any that have come back with clearly non-terrestrial origin?
Unqualified, yes.
Tell us about it.
Well, we've had indications of non-terrestriality of these objects since about maybe the fifth or sixth surgery. But as I said, some of the techniques for looking at isotopic ratios were not as refined as they were today, so you could kind of hem-haw around and say, well, yeah, maybe it's non-terrestrial, and then maybe again it's not non-terrestrial, and you can run this test and this test and that test and so on. But now the newer equipment is, there's even been, Kevin, a tremendous change in the equipment that we use for electron microscopy. At one time, you used to have to pour in a large, high amount of kilovoltage comparing to water, that's the amount of water you pour in or the amount of voltage you pour in to get greater magnifications. Now the newer equipment uses very small amount of kilovoltage, and you can go up to 750,000 times magnification at the flick of a switch.
Okay, so you say since about the fifth or sixth one, you've been getting isotopic ratios that show non-terrestrial origin. Among the ones that are showing non-terrestrial origin, are you does any one of them stand out as being perhaps a little bit more spectacular than the others?
Not really, because once you establish non-terrestriality, I don't know how much more spectacular you can get. I mean, that's pretty spectacular to me. If we knew more about our solar system and the surrounding universe, we could say, oh yeah, this particular object, like you said, came from Mars or Venus or the Moon or an asteroid. But we don't. We have samplings of the Moon, we have samplings of Mars. I think there's some data of spectrometry that was done on Venus, and we do have a lot of meteorite data. So, let me give you an example. How do we know that the meteorite that NASA finally stuck to their guns and said had carbonaceous life in it came from Mars? Well, it's the same thing. It's because the isotopic ratios found in that meteorite were the same as the ones from Mars. How do we determine meteoric iron, for example, from earthly iron that we mine? Well, it's based on the ratio of nickel to iron in the sample. So you can identify these objects if you know something about what the chemistry and physics is of the object that they may have been an original part of. But we don't. So, as I've mentioned before, we do have a nuclear physicist who's working with us, and he uses decay ratios to compare to the distances between celestial bodies. And he's come out and made a statement that said that some of these objects do not come from this